Hello, and welcome to a presentation by the Federation for Children with Special Needs. Today's topic is understanding data, and this is part of the CPAC Summer School Series. So welcome. Our learning objectives today are really to give you an overall view of data and how really specifically CPACs can use data and learn about data. The concept here is to understand the different types of data and when they would be most effective for a CPAC to use. Our Serving on Groups curriculum that we're following has an 8-step process to collect and use and analyze data. So we'll be briefly going through that, but mostly talking a little bit not only about where to find data about your school district and your school populations in Massachusetts here, but how to use that data effectively in presentations. So data is really factual information. It's information that a CPAC can use to set goals, document progress, really be part of their advisory role in improving systems. But we must make sure that the data that we use is not only reliable, valid, but accessible, so that it really should be accurate and true. And we can get data from lots of different sources. We just need to make sure that it's valid and it measures what it claims to measure. And we want, especially when we present data to different audiences, that it meets the needs of the audience, and so that it's really accessible for them. Data is the kind of the bottom of this whole triangle of wisdom, really. It's the factual information that gives you more information on a topic. You're building knowledge and expertise, and that ultimately wisdom. So it's really the base of any type of analysis. There are really two different forms of data that we're going to be talking about today: quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative data is information about quantities, which can be measured, written down as numbers. It answers the questions of how much or how often. And some examples in an educational setting would be test scores, attendance rates, grades of students. The qualitative data is more about qualities and deals with descriptions, data that really can be observed. It answers why and how something happened, and it's more of a story format. So a family story is an example. Samples of a student's work are documents and information that can be observed, and it has a different place in the analysis, but I hope that CPACs will realize that using both types of data when you present might be the strongest case, that you can present the factual numbers and quantities about a topic, but you also share the impact that it has on a family or a student, and that's a qualitative data point. And by bringing the two of them together, I think you'll meet your listening audience's needs for understanding on your point or your topic. So we did some brainstorming of where CPACs could use data. Not every CPAC has made a formal report to the school committee or their administration, but we started to look at where CPACs could use data to support their advisory role. And a lot of them talked about if they were doing some analysis of class size or numbers of students, just even informing their school committee as to the types of disabilities that are represented in the school district, so that they could bring that data to light. And it would help when you're looking at different types of programming, when students are being served in district or out of district, and how that all works. And just having the raw numbers, the elements of where things are in your district is good information. And so there's lots of ways that CPACs can use data. Schools speak data. They work around data, and they make their plans and their budgets around data. So the more CPACs can understand data, the better informed they're going to be as an advisor. So the serving on groups curriculum is very strong in the area of data. And I would suggest that you go to their website, go to the guidebook, and look at section 6, because it's very complex in terms of the way it explains these 8 stages of data use. And we're only going to quickly review them. So as a CPAC is starting to think about using data, they should come up with a plan, prepare how they're going to use data and set those goals out, and their focus be narrow enough so that they can accomplish their task. Ultimately, they'll go around collecting data, and that could be done through actual surveys where they ask people for information and take in that data. But they also may want to review data that's currently existing, either within the school district or in your community. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit about where CPACs can find some data about their school district on the Department of Elementary and Secondary website here in Massachusetts. Ultimately, they're going to have to organize that data in some fashion to see, do they have enough data and the correct data? And then they're going to start to look at it and analyze it and see what it's telling them, you know, where some data might be outliers, or is it all, you know, pointing in the same direction? Because you're going to be thinking about, are we developing a hypothesis of what is this data telling us and why? And then use that ultimately in making recommendations. You're going to either create an action plan on how you're going to use the data, or you'll share that data with other boards, with administration, with other organizations, so that you can come up with that action plan, because it's really about knowing what that data is telling you. And a lot of times it just might raise more questions that might lead to more investigation and data collection. Whatever actions you take based on your data, we've been talking this summer about, you know, that continuous monitoring process, that you reevaluate, that you get some feedback on what you're doing to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. And using that continuous monitoring process and improving is a good plan, part of your whole plan. So the takeaways from those 8 stages in the Serving on Groups curriculum are really to, you know, ask those early focusing questions so that you know you're planning well. You're reviewing all the available data. It might be all right there and you just have to pull it all together. You really only want to collect data that you're going to use. We've had a lot of surveys go out to families recently in the last 2 years during COVID, and you want to make best use of people's time. So only collect the data that you're going to use. And ultimately, when you organize it and present it, you want to put it in a way that people will understand. So using different types of graphs or graphics is a good plan. I know some of the survey tools have automatic ways of presenting your the data, the answers to your question in a kind of graphic format with color and bars and graphs and circles, so that people can visually see it quickly and understand it. I think comparing data over time also will help a CPAC identify a trend. Just knowing that in the last 2 years of COVID, things have been very, very different. So that if you're looking at a 5-year trend, you'll take that into account for maybe some of the data changes, the numbers over the years. There are many, many ways to collect data, and you might start to review, you know, what's best for your group. Looking at that data from different viewpoints, having a larger group analyze and, you know, bring viewpoints to life, and determining how you're going to analyze those numbers. So the Serving on Groups goes into a larger description about what it indicates when you use a mean, a median, or a range. So are you taking an average of all the numbers? Is the number that you're quoting in the middle, or are you showing a range of numbers and data? So knowing what those terms mean and how to use them will help you present the numbers accurately. And whatever you do, you need to have some group agreement and people accept the findings, or else you really need to do that homework to get ready to present on a united front. Because ultimately you're going to have to share these results. So some of the things you may want to think about is, are your findings statistically significant? And I know some of the CPACs have brought survey results forward to a school committee and have them questioned because there were only maybe 47 responses with a population of special ed in the hundreds, and whether that was representative. And so it's always valuable. It's a representative sample. And I also think that you should use the data and the information that comes forward as it's a snapshot in time, but it also might lead you to more questions, more investigation, maybe even more buy-in from the district to find out more information, to collect more data so that they are also informed, and you're starting to move forward, because it usually highlights a concern that at least some families have. And I think that should always be acted on. You know, a CPAC is representing the district's interests and not really moving forward one family's concern. And so your data needs to be more of a representative body. You're developing that kind of hypothesis, but ultimately it's finding out why. Why is this happening? And you know, what is the data telling us, and what can we learn from the data? So if you are going to put it in some kind of a written report or PowerPoint presentation, make sure that it's appealing and accessible to the audience. It should be accurate. Fair and objective is difficult. That's why we always suggest that you share all results of any data collection with all of the bodies that are going to be looking at it, analyzing it, because they may have a different perspective and viewpoint. And so make sure that people have a background as to when and why the data was collected, so that you can come together and really make an action plan that's going to work and that's focused, has those deadlines, and you know, who's going to do what. Data presentation ideas is just, these are two links to two websites that will give you some suggestions. The Data Equity Toolkit, I think, is great. And it starts off with those questions, like who is the audience and what story do we want to tell? And does that data connect to your policy goals? And that's why I think it's interesting to have not only the qualitative, the number data, but also the story data behind it, because it helps tell that story. It helps tell the reason why you're bringing this forward, and where you might want to see some systems change or systems improvement. Having data alone doesn't guarantee a good presentation. It's really how it's presented. And so there's a nice Harvard Business Review article on presenting your data. And I think that's a nice quick read to kind of get you set up to create a presentation that will be responded to by those listening. So one of the things that I think I've helped school CPACs over the year is how to find the data on the DESE website. So the data is maybe 1 or 2 years behind, because they collect, you know, from the past fiscal year, and by the time they get it up on the website, you'll notice it's always dated, so you'll know which years the data is from. You go to the profiles page on the department website, and you search by district name. It's school and district profiles, so you can always search by an individual school, but most CPACs work district-wide. So they're looking at data from the district. There is a district report card that you would click on, and then you can start to look at some of the charts there. For example, student demographics has students with disability and percentages there. There's always more detailed enrollment data, and we'll go into that. But one of the tabs on the top of that profile page is called Trends and DART. And that allows you to compare those charts with another school district. And that's interesting if you want to see how you compare with, say, a similar size and economic community, another school district, and see where your school district is at and how it compares with another school. The statewide reports, which is also a tab on that profile page, brings you to another page. And the state reports look at all of these different kinds of groupings, enrollment and indicators to help you get a sense of your district's average class size, the English language learner percentages, the students with disabilities. They also have collaboratives. Your district belongs to an educational collaborative and students may be served by collaboratives, but it shows you how the level of need and the numbers of students in there, graduation rates, dropout rates. These are things that affect how programming should be looked at by a CPAC. You know, are students graduating? Do we have a lot of students dropping out? Are students attending out of district schools? So a lot of that data is available for you to review and look at, and numbers. And I know discipline has come up for a lot of CPACs. There was recently some new guidance pushed out by OSERS and OCR, these federal bureaus around discipline, especially discipline for students with disabilities. So knowing what your actual numbers are around days missed, you know, incident reports, restraint reports, and comparing that to some of the guidance and where we should be moving, I think helps the CPAC in their advisory role. One of the areas that, this is my favorite chart to look up on the website, is the enrollment of students with disabilities specifically. And it's not on the profile page. So the link here is where you'll find it. It's under Info Services, and the Special Education Enrollment by Disability lists all of the school districts in the state, and then would identify the number of students with disabilities, SWD, and then it will list the numbers by different disability types that are identified on that student's IEP, so that you can find out what your largest population is. And a lot of CPACs think it's autism, but it's really specific learning disability. And so you'll get a sense of why maybe some of your programming is happening in your district. You might only have a very small population of students with a specific disability that are not being served in the district and are because you don't have enough population for a program, and that's why students are out of district. So it helps you understand some of the dynamics that go into not only program services, but budgets within your district. The department has a policy brief called Exploring Massachusetts Special Education Data from February 2020. This is a nice quick read on understanding trends in special education, especially in Massachusetts. So they look at trends of the last 10 years. They have an overview of the radar data, and I'll be talking about that. And then they also have data pertaining to regional and vocational school districts. So that report is available online. And I didn't know if a lot of CPACs knew about that, but that's a good place if you're just new to data and understanding data. It talks about the radar data, and this is where you'll find it on the department website. And this is really, radar stands for Resource Allocation and District Action Reports. And this is where school districts go to start comparing how they're spending to other districts. And I think you can kind of group at least 10 districts together and look at it in comparison. So it's a fun place to do some data checking and analysis. You can see some trends over years. It talks a little bit more about staffing levels and per pupil spending levels. And so it's just more data and more information, but a ways to kind of play with the data and do some comparison. So it's just another place. Once again, understanding that COVID in the last 2 years have affected and skewed the data a little bit because we just weren't operating the same we had in the past years prior to that. This is the last website that I'm going to share, and it's not a government website. It's a nonprofit that assists districts in planning and saving costs on school transportation for out-of-district students. So we know that that's a very expensive proposition, and so often several school districts in a certain area may pool together their students that are being sent to a Chapter 766 school and share that van or that bus that goes there so that it's a little bit of cost savings. And so what this does is informs the CPAC to where the district is sending some students, the numbers of students, and understanding why maybe some of the budget items are larger because of the transportation costs. But it's just, you know, transparent information about, so you can search all districts and then look at a specific program, which is one of the 766 schools, and see who is going to that program, or you can choose your own district and see where they're sending and using students to different programs. So it just offers an understanding of where some of the out-of-district placements are, you know, not identifying individual students, but the programs that may be part of your school district out-of-district placement. Interesting website that you can explore. So here are some some resources. There's some reports that you can read about educational data. The Rennie Center has one, and the first one is, I forget what aypf.org was, but those are two reports that you can read. There's also the Student Information System, the SIMS data that you can access off the department website. And these are two links to federal sites where you can get more statewide data and then compare it to other states if that's an area of interest for you. I'm not sure if the OCR website dives down into districts. I think it does, but I haven't checked it out in a while. But that's another website that collects data, especially data around discipline. So there's lots of places to find data. I think the best thing to do if you're going to do a presentation is to talk to other CPACs, connect to them, ask them to share their presentation or what they've done to present data and what was effective and what wasn't. And then give it a try and create a report for your school committee and deliver it and see what their reaction is and where they would like you to go. Maybe move in certain different directions, or they might even ask you to collect some data. So start working with the people that you advise to make sure that you're keeping them informed of trends in the district, information that they should have as background as they make decisions. So thanks for attending this workshop.